Hello everyone, and welcome back to my second video. So I now have 3 little pillows here. I've had some fun over the last week. So I've showed you how to make this one last week, as you are probably aware. Sorry if there's any noise in the background. It's currently storming, but it's the only time I have to actually film, so we just got to deal. So that's the one I made last week, and then today I made up these 2. So this is what I was talking about, where you surround your design with fabric, and it works exactly the same as making the other pillow, except for this time you put a little bit of you sew some fabric on as if you were doing patchwork around the outside. And you would have found the instructions how to do this if you followed the blog post for the quilted hanger. So it talks about how to do the patchwork front, and then even how to turn it into a pillow. So it has all the full thing, except for I finished that piece as a flat hanger. So I did these 2 as little pillows. This is a new little design, so I will be working. It'll be available soon, hopefully. I've got to finalise a couple of things with it, but it's based off my little teddy, and I thought it'd be really cute and good thing at this time of year, considering how many grade 12s are graduating, and also university students, I'm sure. Anyway, so I've got these 3 pillows that I'm going to be looking at doing some different finishes on. I think I've pretty much decided I'm going to add this ribbon with the bow to this one, and it's just going to be hung up by that. And although it's a Christmassy ribbon, it's quite nice. And I'll show you how to tie this ribbon. So you have the really neat bow and then the loop. And we'll have a talk about that. I think I'm going to do the twisted yarn cord around this one, and that'll be a nice edge for this one. And then I think I haven't done this finish for a while, but I'm going to be a bit different, for myself anyway. Let's get to an end of the ribbon. And I'm going to do this ribbon finish, where you sew the ribbon back and forth as you go around. So it's a little bit of a different finish. It makes a really nice edge. So those will be the 3 finishes I'm going to be doing, and 3 ways I'm going to show you how to do this. Now, the finish I do on this teddy, you could do it exactly the same finish with a cord or a bit of ribbon, or I've done it before with this sort of braided finish, and it would be kind of cute, but don't really want to do that right now. So there's all sorts of different trims and things that you can use for that. If you know other ways to tie bows, there's a couple of different ways you can tie a bow that you can use to glue onto here. But I'm going to be talking about the easiest way to do this. And that's tying the ribbon into a bow with a loop is the simplest way to finish one of these little pillows, and gives you a nice hanger. And so this last one's going to be the most complicated, but it's actually quite a good way to do it. So let's get started. So we're going to start with making the bow to stick on top of this. So how do you get this looped bow? And this is the most important bit, is because when you're creating an ornament you want to be able to hang on your tree, you need some sort of loop. And so each of these options I'll be talking about the ways to create the loop, because that's actually as important as creating the thing itself. Now, here I've got a water bottle, and the feature you want is the fact that it's round. Do not use a mug. Do not use a mug, because the problem with a mug is that you can't pull the loop off at the bottom. So you want a cup or a glass bottle, or in this case a water bottle, something that's round. You don't want it to be overly thick, because the bigger you make it, the bigger the loop will be. And this is pretty near perfect, so it's only just a normal size water bottle from Kmart. Glasses will work, anything like that. But if you make it too big, because the size of your loop will be the size of your bottle. And if you go too big, it will look a little silly when finished. So, using a bottle and your ribbon, I pull the ribbon round and tie, not just making sure that your ribbon isn't twisted at all. That's actually really important, and one of the reasons why it's easiest to do this around a bottle. Make sure you've got a lot of excess here, enough to do, use the end that's actually cut. So you've got your loop and a bit left over. I might even just pull a little bit extra through. Just to make sure that I've definitely got enough there. Now, and the other thing I will do is I'm going to cut the ribbon now. You will end up cutting more off it as you go, and if you do want to keep it connected you can, but it just makes it a little bit more complicated trying to fiddle with that as well as everything else. Now, so when you've got your ribbon and you've got your simple left over right knot, I'm just holding it tight right now. You want to hold your bottle, cup, whatever you're using, so that you're running to the side. Now you make one loop, two loop, and then you bring one over and pull it through. Now this is where you start manipulating this. So as you're pulling it tighter, one of the things you want to make sure that you've done is you want both your ribbons, your loops to be flat, and both your ribbons to come below. So as you can see, when I pulled it through, When you loop it over and then pull that loop through, it's all twisted, and then as you're slowly pulling it tighter, you're manipulating it so that it's sitting neatly. Now, before you pull it fully tight, you pull it off, and again, manipulating it, because what you're going to want, now we can see here, got our 2 loops in our bow. Now, we want this loop keeps wanting to turn that backwards. So we just got to make sure we twist it, and it's going to come out in a way that benefits, because we want that coming down. The other thing is we've got this loop here, and now we don't want it coming out sideways. We want it coming out the top. So you can see here, by pulling it, we can get it around the top of our bow, get these at the bottom, and we can start pulling a bit tighter. Again, you don't want to pull it 100% tight yet, because one of the things you want to do, you're going to want to make these bows even and it looking all neat and tidy. Now, I like to work out where on the top of your piece, on your pillow, it's going to end up. Now, depending on the size of the pillow, I sometimes use the top of the pillow as an indicator for these bows. So in this case, because it's not a very wide pillow, this works really well. Sometimes I just use, but in this case, I want it going through right to the edge of the pillow. So you can see here where they're sitting now. And I'm happy with that length. And this is when you start pulling tight. And very carefully pulling that tight, making sure you're keeping everything where you want it to be kept. Because what you want is your loop at the top, your 2 bows, and then the tails coming down the bottom. Sometimes, depending what sort of thing, you want the tails at the back, but in this case you want the tails at the bottom. You can see here. Oh. So I've got to actually debate now whether which one of these 2 I actually want to stick on. I'm really liking this dark purple, but I also like this white one. I'm thinking I'm going to go with the contrast of this darker purple, because there's a lot of white in this, which is fine. Now, the other thing you're going to be doing is just tidying up these bows at the bottom. So work out a nice length. I always like to make sure it's longer or as long as the loops. It just looks nicely balanced. In the case of this, I'm just going to cut them straight across. Because I'm actually going to use the fabric glue that I'm going to use to attach the bow to seal off those ends as well, so it's going to look all neat. Now, you have a couple of choices with attaching the bow. As I showed in the beginning, I like to use this fabric glue. It's Helmer's fabric glue. It's what I've been using now for about the last 8 years or so. I've found that every time I've used it, it's held properly. It's a clear tacky glue, fabric glue, and it's exactly what I need, and I've used it for numerous projects. Now, if you don't want to get a hold of the glue, you don't need it for this one. You can just sew your bow on. It just takes a lot of extra time to sew the bow. So I do recommend using the glue, but it's not a requirement. The other thing you're going to need is some tissues. This glue is notorious for leaking and for creating a little bit extra, so you want a tissue that can just sit there and can pick up all the extra. So what I'm going to start doing first, I'm just going to lay my ribbon down. Now, I like working onto my finger when doing things like these ends. Now, this glue does dry clear. For anything you're using like this, you want a glue that dries clear. Now, if you decide not to go the glue route, and it goes tacky very quickly, so you've got one thing to note is you work quickly with this glue. If you decide not to go the glue route and not to buy it, that's fine. Use nail polish, or there's Fray Check. There's a couple of different options you can use on the ends. You can cut the ribbon with a V shape, and that can stop it fraying. The biggest problem I find with that is still over time it will fray. And the biggest one I've found is this glue does stop it doing that. Just make sure you've gone all the way to the ends. And it really doesn't take long to dry. Now, so I've got my ribbon already, and I'm going to be placing, so I've got my glue. So now I've got my glue coming down. I'm going to put a dollop You want to make sure it's a decent amount of glue, but not so much that it's going to end up everywhere. And it is a fine balance. Not enough and it's not going to hold. And so, just laying my ribbon along there. Now you want to hold it in such a way that all the ribbon pieces are sitting nicely. And as you saw on my hand before, it won't take long to dry. Maybe hold it here for about a minute. And you can see. I wouldn't hang it. I would leave it before hanging it for at least a couple of hours, just to make sure that glue is set properly, but it won't take long to dry. And so you can see on the front here, I did make sure that those two things were sitting nicely. And here, okay, and I can now move my hand off there. I'm just going to let that sit off to the side and let that dry. And that, there, is the ribbon. And that's how you attach it. Now, if you do want to, you'll find, yeah, if you do want to sew it, it'll take a little bit more work. And you get the needle and you just sew it around as if you were going to do it any else. Well, so it's attached and so it's solid, but I find that I don't like to do that. Because I always have the glue, I just glue it. It's easier than any other thing I've used. Okay, I'm going to stop this video and we're going to next talk about how to do the acrylic around this pillow. Okay, please excuse the mess in this one because I'm going to have to move the vid camera around a little bit to try and get in everything that's happening. I will link to a blog post where I show you pictures of just what to do, and it may be a little bit easier to see some of the stages because it can get a little difficult to film. So we're going to be adding the acrylic yarn corded edge around this one. So as in this one, you can see this twisted yarn. Now this is not just your normal yarn. Okay, this is actually a twisted cord, and the way to create this cord, this is through twisting the yarn to create a cord. Now, here, I've just got a piece of yarn around the base of music stand at the moment. Okay, and it's a fairly long piece. You want to work with a couple of meters if you can, folded over around something. Doorknobs, chairs, anything like that will work. You'll probably end up having to cut it off the other end, but that's all right. So this method, you got the yarn and you will be twisting it. So let's see if I can get a slightly better view. It's really hard to capture this in an easy way. So you'll be twisting it. Always twist the same way. So whether you decide you're going to twist to the right or twist to the left, always twist the same way. To start with, you won't, and you can see it's done that. To start with, you won't need to hold it tight. But as you work through, you'll find if you don't hold it tight, it will start to bend on itself. And see, you can already see it creating some nice twists. So we keep going. And you can see it's starting to create a twist there. Let's keep going. And there's twists. Keep putting them through. Now I'm going to pull my hands in behind this camera for a bit. And you can see it's starting to create the look we're wanting. Now, the longer you go, the thinner and the tighter the cord will be, and the better for holding. but the a looser one can also look good. So it may take you a couple of tries to work out what you want and what you look at. But it's one of the reasons why I like using the acrylic yarn, because it's actually really easy and you get some really nice effects. You could even create your own sparkly cords. So if you had a sparkly yarn, so just like I'm doing here, where I'm twisting it, if you were to use a sparkly yarn tied in, that could give a really nice effect. Let's keep going for a bit. And what you'll start to notice is if I loosen it, you'll start to do that. But I don't want to do that quite yet. Now, starting to get quite a nice starting to get a nice twist in this. It's really hard for it to focus on this. I'm just going to go for it just a little bit more. I want a nice tight. Okay. And when I think I've got it right, so holding it carefully, to create this, what you'll end up doing is carefully sorry, as I said, there's no real nice way to video this, not with the setup I've got. So I'll carefully be folding this piece in half. So I'm going to cut one end off carefully, holding it tight off the music stand. And you want to fold it in half. And then you're bringing, so you're going to want this cord to fold along itself. And so you can see here, I've created a cord that twists. See if I can get it to focus on this. So I've created a cord that twists on itself. Now, to get it to stay, you will need to knot the end that's not folded. And then that'll stay as a corded rope. Now, you can see down this end, in the middle, it's a lot tighter than the end down near the end. To get it to be more even, you need to twist it more. And the other thing I've got to check, I don't know whether or not I've made enough. So I just run it around the edges. And a loop, and I have only just made enough. So your cord and as you can see, this end nearest my knot is unraveling just a little bit. So this means I didn't twist it just enough down this end, while this end is nice and tight and corded. So I'm actually going to try again, and I'm going to do it off camera, and I'm going to get a little bit longer. So this piece was 2 meters long. Okay, so I might actually go closer to 3 meters and try around my doorknob, but I'll be back soon. Okay, so I've just redone with a slightly longer piece of cord, and I've twisted for a lot longer, and you can see when you twist for a lot more, you end up with a much tighter cord, and it ends up much thinner. Now, neither is wrong, so if you do like that slightly looser cord, that's fine. It's just different, and this one's just that little bit longer because I used a longer piece of thread to start with. So this cord is going to be just a little bit nicer to fit around. Now, for these little pillows, I personally do like that slightly thinner cord, but I have used that thicker cord before. And you can continue to go thinner again. As you can see around these ones, the cord that I've used on these is actually really thin. Thinner even than these ones. So you keep twisting and twisting and twisting. And if you test it out and work out what works for you. So keep testing it, keep trying it, and seeing what you like. And seeing the effect that you like the best. Now, when I have done these before, okay, so this is one where there's no real easy way to do it without the glue. I have done it. You could couch the thread, so where you sew it with a thread that goes around and you sew it to hold to the edge, but it's definitely not the most efficient way to do it. It would take a lot longer than you really want to spend on it. Now, remembering with this glue, you need to work carefully but quickly. Now, leaving a little bit of a tail, I'm trying not to leave too big a tail but not too small a tail, because I'm going to just have enough yarn here. So it takes a surprisingly large amount of yarn to make this cord, because you've got to then, after twisting, you double it over. So just wiped off the excess just before. Now I running carefully along that edge. Then I lay the yarn down, and then I'm just going to hold there for a couple seconds and let it set as I start to move down this next line. Now you will end up with these trails. Try again not to put too much glue there, because if you put too much, you're going to end up with a lot of excess showing around. As you can see, just working my way down, holding that there for those couple of seconds to let it start to set, but you don't want it to be set too much right at this edge where you're working from. Otherwise, now, carefully. Now this method would work with any of the cords, braids. You could do this method for ribbon. Now, carefully round that corner, halfway down. Now, just being very careful, I try to be very careful not to get too much glue on my fingers as I'm working, or if I am, to pull it off so I'm not leaving excess where I'm going. And I'm trying not to move too far ahead too quickly, but also trying not to let everything settle all at once. Okay. As you can see, particularly around the corners, you just want to be careful and make sure both sides of the corner are nicely held. I'm trailing just a little bit extra glue at the back there. So you can end up with a little bit of excess. There's the reason why I work from the front is so that you can make sure that the front particularly is looking neat, because that's the one side you really want to have looking neatest. Oh, sorry. Keep moving. See. Okay. Now, I've done this top section a couple of ways over the years. The way I'm showing you is where you don't have to cut into the top. I will also attach a blog post where I show where you actually make a slight little slit at the top, and you glue both ends into that slit, which is what I've used to create this one. So you don't end up with this very noticeable knot or anything at the top. But I'm just going to be a little different today. Now, again, we're going to want our loop, and I'm going to want it about halfway down. Now, in the case of this, you can see here what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my loop, and I'm going to loop this other end around. And it's just going to hang down there. So I'm going to have my 2 loops hanging down. So the one from the loop that goes around. And now I don't have a very long piece of thread left. So it's just going to sit up. So I haven't glued anything yet. So I'm going to very carefully come through with this glue. Now you could create a bow. You could create a loop and then tie a bow of this cord around. You could create, as I've done previously, where you create a slit and then you glue these ends of the thread down into the slit. All those methods work. Okay, I've currently got this just holding this up. I want that held down a bit before I glue the excess, the rest of it down. So let that set. So there's lots of different ways you could do this bit. You could do the cord with the loop and then tie around it with a ribbon. When creating this corded rope, you can use the embroidery thread that you've used on your design. So there's lots of different ways to make it really suit the design. I find the cord is a little bit more masculine. Not entirely. You made a cross-stitch pattern. They're not going to be 100% masculine in that regard, but it doesn't have to be. Okay, so here I've got, so see what I mean? You got to be really careful not to carry your glue too far, or careful it's not moved on your hand. Thankfully I didn't get it on my stitching itself. Okay, now I'm going to pull some glue along the front here, and don't be afraid. One thing I like to do as I'm working is to use the tissue. Every couple of times. Because you end up with these globs at the top of the glue, and you need the precision that you don't get with that. Now, I'm going to let that dry. And see, because I've made this other one thing I could do, once it's dry, is tie around it again. So a couple of different ways. What I'm going to end up doing is, once it's dry and set, is tie a knot here and then trim them both up to the same length. And I'm going to have that sort of finish. So I'm going to leave this one here and let it dry, and then I'll show you how it's going to turn out later. Okay, let's get started with the last one. Started doing it without even thinking about it, and then realised I really should be filming this. So just to start, I tied a knot, brought it in from over here. So double thread. Now this is using a thin ribbon, and it works best with the thin one. The thick one ends up, doesn't loop properly. And so, yeah, tied a knot at the end, threaded it through from here, pulled it up into the middle. Pulled it through and then just tugged it a little bit to get it to come, the knot to come on the inside. Now this one works. Then I came up, caught the end of the, just a little stitch up and down, and then I moved just a little bit away, and then you catch. And you just keep doing that. Now I'm actually going to do one more loop, and then I'm going to do the top, and then I'm going to keep going round. Now the other way you can do this, and I don't have any seed beads at the moment, is you can, instead of just doing a little stitch, you can actually put a little seed bead where you catch every single one. In the case of this, you can see I haven't gone back and forth different ways, not just all up and down. So there are a couple of different ways you can make this look. And this is one of the only ones that actually a needle and thread is all you need to do it. And it's easier to do it just with a needle and thread. Okay, now let's just work our way through this. So what you want to do is when you come up to grab it, you want to go back down just near it, just beside it, so you end up with the smallest little stitch. And in this case, I'm working about 1/2 centimetre-ish away. You can try and make these all exactly the same height, all these loops, or in the case of this, I'm just making them close. Now, I'm going to go up. Go down here, and then because this is where I'm going to create my loop, I'm going to come pretty much straight back up, almost where I went down, right near it. And where, again like these ones. Now, there's a couple ways you can do this. That's the height I want mine. Now I'm going to make sure that when I come up at the front, the ribbon's overlapping. Now, one thing you can add is a little bow, but I'd add that on at the end. Right now, I'm just adding the loop. Again, so up. Now, when I go down, I'm actually going to try and go down and catch into the back ribbon as well, so they're kind of held together. So you can see here, on up and down. Right, let's move this on. So you can see here, there's my ribbon up and down, and I'll just keep going. Just bending this ribbon up, down, all the way around. Now I'm just going to go to the end of the row and show you what that looks like. Alright, so I've got to the end, and you can just see the effect this is. So you're just going up, down, and it ends up looking just a little bit messy, but kind of cool in the messiness, which is exactly what I'm going for this one. So you're just creating this edge. On the corner, you just want to make sure you're going up and down getting a couple loops around that corner or very close to it. And just make sure you're not going too far away, because when you start going too far away, they just end up, or they don't get this messy loop look. They end up a little bit too much, a little bit too tight. But I'm going to continue. I don't think you need me to show you as I'm videoing the whole way around. And then I'll get round to this point and finish off, and then I think I may or may not add a ribbon here, a bow. But let's get going. Okay, so here we have our 3 finished cross-stitch pillows. So I'll start with number 1. So you guys have seen this. Here it's got my, just with the bow around it. That's what it looks like. It's the simplest finish. It's really easy and any bow will work. You start going too thick and it will start overwhelming the pillow itself. But it's such a simple, quick little finish. We've got our second finish, which is using the acrylic cord. So you can see, so you do end up with a bit of glue residue. So the more careful you are around those edges, and the thinner piece of, but thinner the bit of glue you're laying down, the better. But it's not overly noticeable. It's more noticeable because I'm really zooming in right now, trying to show you it. But you pull out and you see the hole. And this is one of my favourite finishes. I really do like using the cord. And I did something different. I will link a blog post where I show where you cut a slit in the top of the pillow and you actually glue the 2 ends in there, so you don't have them at the front like this. But this one, just this loop you come round, and then this end you just tie around. And then I knotted them both, and they're just glued around there. So that's just a different finish. And this way of doing it, you definitely need the glue, but you could do that finish with numerous, with any sort of cord. And if you wanted to, with this cord that you make, if you found like a metallic thread, you could spin the metallic thread into the cord, using like a metallic DMC or something like that, in with the acrylic yarn. There's all sorts of things you could do to make an interesting look, and trying different things, trying 2 colours and getting a 2-colour cord, and just having a bit of fun with the different things. And then here's our last finish. So this one's just a little bit of fun. I didn't show as much of this one, so you can see a little bit of that. If you were to put beads instead of just the quick little threads, they're not particularly noticeable. Again, I'm zooming right in to try and show you guys how it looks. The idea is that it's messy. It won't end up looking neat. You can't get those curls looking neat very easily. There's the finish. I just made sure they overlapped. When I have a moment, I will put a bit of nail polish or glue onto the end of them so they won't keep fraying. Just haven't had a chance yet. And yeah, my needle's just been held there so I don't lose it on the way until I can get back to my pin cushion, which is at home. So I've kind of moved to a different location for, if you haven't noticed the floor. So yeah, here are the 3 finishes. So I'm really happy with how all of them turned out. They're all different, but really don't take very long to do. and just give a really different effect. So I hope this was informative and I hope it helps you.